Good afternoon, everybody. That was amazing, Elizabeth and Christopher, wherever you are. I don't know what I could possibly add to what those two just said. And I don't have any really cool reveals that like my sister's in the audience or anything like that. That was wonderful. So let me just get started. I'm 42 years old, which means that I am old enough to stand here delivering a commencement address. But it also means that I don't feel old enough to be standing here delivering a commencement address. One of the few things I remember from high school was that Socrates quote, "The only thing in that I am wise is that I know I am not wise." It helps if you say it like Obi-Wan Kenobi. That quote feels about right for this moment right now. Add to that the fact that my oldest son, Aiden, is graduating today. And so I feel compelled to say something so awesome and mind-blowing that he and all his friends will think I'm cool. The problem is almost all commencement speeches, other than the two amazing ones that just happened, are about the same thing, more or less. Go and make the world a better place for our children. Don't litter. Be nice to people, even if they're gluten-free. So clearly I'm in kind of a quandary here, figuring out what to talk about. So in a situation like this, I have two options. One is that I can sing this song and be done with it. Here's to the ones who dream. I can't do it. I was going to try to keep going and get the whole crowd to do it. I wish that I had planned the flash mob. Actually, can we all just go home and watch La La Land right now? So what I usually do when I'm in a quandary like this is I tell stories. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story today and trust that Aiden will still think I'm cool even if the rest of you don't. I don't remember a lot about high school, but I definitely remember the feeling of high school. And the feeling I mainly remember was a combination of aimlessness, restlessness, and recklessness. I was sort of a class clown. I know that's hard for you to believe right now, but the truth is, all that goofiness was a disguise, hiding the fact that I was a young man with a lot of fear. Fear that I would never do anything worthwhile, that I was a waste of space, that I would fail at life as badly as I failed at algebra. You guys are all smarty pants homeschool kids, so you may not know what I'm talking about, but maybe you do. I went to a public high school in Florida. It was the county high school for the smallest county in the state of Florida. I think we had about 90 people in my graduating class. So that's right, 90 seniors in the entire county. I was often up to no good. Nothing malicious most of the time. Mostly it was just knuckleheaded, blabber-mouthing, squirming in my seat kind of stuff. In our school, in our town, the teachers were allowed to spank you. Corporal punishment was a thing. Back then, it may still be a thing, I don't know. But we called them swats, or licks. And I remember once I got a lick each day, this is in 8th grade, I got a lick each day for a week by different teachers, mainly for not keeping my mouth shut. The rest of my mischief was just dumb class clown stuff. For example, sometimes when the teacher wasn't looking, I would hide the hall passes in weird places in the classroom. And then after they had ordered new ones, I would pull out the ones that I had hidden. One time in Spanish class, I scooted my desk back about 1/8 of an inch every 30 seconds, so that by the end of class, I was against the back wall without the teacher noticing. I remember staring at my pencil for during lectures, trying to use the force to make it roll by itself. My crowning achievement, however, was when they would announce over the intercom that certain clubs were to be excused for the library, to the library for yearbook or newspaper pictures. I would go whether or not I was in the club. I would just get up and leave as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Most of the time, my friends, who were actually club members, were in on it. In one of the pictures in my high school yearbook, I'm hiding under a table, and you can see just one of my eyes peeking out from behind the chair. But word got around, and some kids in the Super Brainy Club, or whatever it was called, were understandably miffed that a D student was trying to sneak into their photo shoot, and they tattled on me. And the librarian, Mrs. Swapelthorpe, I just made that up. I couldn't remember her real name. Mrs. Swapelthorpe shooed me out of the library with a lot of angry librarian words. Not so easily defeated, I sprinted down the hall, out the doors of the school, ran around to the windows of the library, and stood on the windowsill with my hands in the air. And then, to my great delight, when the Union County Times came out the next Thursday, it only came out on Thursdays, I discovered with a triumphant pride that I was faintly visible in the background as a blurry figure over Wade Howell's left shoulder. Take that, Mrs. Swapelthorpe. So, believe it or not, I'm telling you all this for a very good reason. A few good reasons. One is to help you all to see what a tremendous gift it has been, you guys. It's weird that you have to be behind me, but I'm gesturing to you. I'll gesture to you and I want you to listen. What a tremendous blessing it is. To be homeschooled by families and by a community that cares as deeply about you and your development as healthy, flourishing members of society. It's not that public schools are all bad. That's not a helpful way to think about it. It's just that the culture of this particular community, the one that we are part of, is one that I think would have been really good for that foolish kid at Union County High School hiding under the table for the Beta Club pictures. The other reason I told you all those stories, and the main thing that I want to talk to you about today, is what it means to live a life with meaning. I don't recommend any of the aforementioned tomfoolery. Part of that stuff was born of my sinful nature, true. But part of it was that the education system I was a part of didn't know what to do with kids like me. Understand, this isn't me bemoaning the teachers and the administration of my high school. They were wonderful, and they did their best for the most part. And the truth is, I could have done better in that system if I had only applied myself, which is what all of my teachers wrote in my yearbook. You'll do fine in life if only you'll apply yourself. I was in the gifted program for a while in elementary school. My grades were bad and I was super weird, and so they thought I was gifted. And so they probably saw me trying to use the force on my pencil. And they thought I would do better in a class where I was learning French or something, and it didn't take. Je ne parle pas François. Je ne sais quoi, oui, oui. I felt tower. So all through high school, I was playing music, I was drawing pictures, I was reading books, and failing tests. I wasn't dumb, but I felt dumb. I felt like there was something wrong with me that wasn't wrong with everyone else. Most of all, I felt a dark and unsettling aimlessness, especially my senior year, because it seemed like everybody else had a plan. Either they were going to community college or to university, or they were working for their parents, or they already had some great job. All I had was a guitar, this dream of music, coupled with a debilitating disbelief that I could ever do it for a living. Because after all, I was from the smallest county in Florida and graduated by the skin of my teeth. After graduation, I worked at the local IGA grocery store, feeling about as aimless and hopeless as you can imagine. It's a long story, but I ended up joining a rock band that toured the exotic reaches of the world in Wisconsin. My time in that band was an odd mixture of utter misery and fun. And when the band broke up, I found myself back home with that same lack of purpose, that same awful fear that I would turn out to be as bad at life as I was at French. Oui, oui. And then something happened that changed everything. So picture me with long hair. Picture me as skinny as a rail. I'm 19 years old. I'm sitting at a grand piano, building a lot like this, in an empty church auditorium in Jacksonville, Florida, at about midnight. I'm trying to learn how to play a song by some guy named Rich Mullins. And the best way I know how to describe what happened is this. God reached through the song that I was learning, reached deep into the dark caverns of my aimless, empty heart, and turned on a light switch. Suddenly I knew in a way that I'd never known before that God was real. Really, really real. All the stories I had learned, all the Bible verses my parents made me memorize, all the sermons my dad had preached, all the nights at youth group, all the prayers before meals, all of it suddenly seemed to drip with purpose, with meaning. It suddenly mattered. I had the feeling that my whole life had been one long wandering in a dark forest, and I had stepped into a lovely sunlit clearing. And in that clearing, a table had been set, and on that table was a little card with my name on it. Can you believe what I'm telling you? I'm not a religious fanatic. I'm not crazy. I'm a grown man whose life was undeniably altered in a definable way. I had been given a life, a beating heart, lungs that expanded and contracted automatically, a mind, a mouth to speak, but I had no idea what to do with any of it. And then I did. It's that simple. As best as I can tell, that's what we in the church talk about as a calling. We say, I've been called to the mission field. I've been called to preach. The word vocation is a Christian word. I don't know if you knew that. According to the interwebs, it comes from Old French, oui, oui, or from Latin vocatio, from vocare, to call. And the Webster defines vocation as a divine call to the religious life. I'm here to tell you today that each of you in this room, not just this graduating class, has a divine call. You may not have heard it yet, or perhaps you've heard but you haven't responded. I don't know how it all works. All I know is there was a moment when my relationship with God was pretty questionable, and then there was a moment, thanks to a Rich Mullins lyric, when I not only believed with a depth of reality that I'd never yet known, that there was indeed a great mystery in the world, and that he had leaned in close to get my attention. But I also saw a path stretching out before me that every cell in my being wanted to follow. Not long after that moment, I said to God, whatever gifts you've given me, I give back. Use them for your kingdom and your glory however you want. If I can write songs and tell stories that wake up others the same way that I was just awoken, then that, if it's your will, that's what I want to do. A few weeks later, to my shock, I was no longer in a rock band, but was starting my freshman year of Bible college. My parents were very happy. I met my wife, Jamie, the first week of school. We were married a year later. I recorded my first record in my junior year of college. I moved to Nashville right after I graduated. I got a record deal, so on and so forth, see if we play. You see, all my gifts were just dead in the water until the Holy Spirit breathed life into their sails. The whole of my life took on meaning when I could no longer ignore the giver of life. So look, I don't know what you believe. You may have grown up in a Christian home, but you just don't buy it. Maybe you've said that out loud, maybe it's just a terrible secret. Then again, maybe you're a Christian and you've never been plagued by doubts. If so, that's wonderful. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but like you heard, you're going to struggle sooner or later. And that's not a bad thing. But I want you to know, moms, dads, grandparents, siblings, students, graduates, that the stories are true. I believe them because, to be honest, I've seen too much. Too much beauty, too much goodness, too many kind and luminous souls whose lives would make no sense if the gospel weren't true. My life wouldn't make sense if the gospel weren't true. That acquiescence, that admission of defeat, that soul surrender, that moment at the piano in the dark church hall when my bones were warmed by the presence of God, when my heart was healed by forgiveness, when my cheeks were wet with tears of gratitude, none of that would make sense if the stories weren't true. It wasn't a delusion. I sincerely believe that I'm not a good enough songwriter or singer or author to have found any success apart from the intervention and the blessing of God. I know what a doofus I am. There are better singers, better writers, but God be praised, he multiplied what little I had and led me into that bright clearing where the table was set. I can't explain it any other way. Each of you has a calling. Each of you has been given gifts. So, 3 quick things. Here's what you do. First, listen for the call. I'm going to look at you guys. Listen for the call. It may not be as dramatic and definable as mine was, though to be honest, mine didn't feel terribly dramatic at the time. I was just sitting at a piano, and then I went home. That was it. But in hindsight, I see that as the moment when it all changed. You guys, just listen. Don't ask yourself what your dreams are. Dreams, at least the way the word is used these days, are fickle things. They will change, they'll die, they're often more about your ambition than anything else. Forget your dreams. Ask God to show you what he wants you to do. What is his dream for you? Lay your ambition on his altar. I promise you whatever he has in mind for you is better far than anything you can come up with on your own. But the beautifully subversive thing is that what he wants is what you want. You just don't know it yet. If you lay down your life, you'll find it. Look at your gifting. Ask yourself what it would look like if you use those gifts to build your own kingdom. And then ask yourself what it would look like to use those gifts to build God's kingdom. The thing is, you're always building a kingdom, either your own or the Lord's. Your job, graduates, is to live out the Lord's Prayer with your talents. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So let his will be done in you, with you now on earth, just as it is in heaven, where Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father. If you can't hear the call, if you've been asking God over and over to show you what to do, then you listen to your community. Michael Card told me once that your community defines your calling. I'm going to say that again. Your community defines your calling. That means that all you have to do is look around at the people God has put in your path and find a way to lay your life down for them. Easy. It also means that your community, your friends, your family, your church can probably see your gifting better than you can. So listen to them. Ask older, wiser people to speak into your calling. Frederick Buechner wrote that the place God calls you to is the place where your deep hunger where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. You're going to need help understanding what that thing is. So listen to the call and let your community define your calling. Second, let that calling guide your decisions and don't waver. Once you've heard that call, all hell will try to distract you from it. We need you to keep fighting. Keep using that gift to build God's kingdom, to love the weak, to add beauty to the world, to encourage your brothers and sisters in Christ. Eugene Peterson wrote a book called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. That's the life I want to live, the life I want you to live. That's what a calling looks like. A long obedience in the same direction. The life that stretches out before you will be the richest, most beautiful, most rewarding thing if you think of it that way. Most of us won't change the world in big, earth-shattering ways. We'll change it quietly, lovingly, like the long obedience of a growing garden. Whatever that calling is, keep at it. But the big question is, what happens when a door is shut? How can you tell if the shut door is God or if it's like the enemy trying to stop you from doing it? Do you knock it down or do you change tactics? It's so hard to tell. Well, I think that if it's the Lord, then that community I was talking about earlier will help you to know it. And if they're affirming your gifting and your calling, then you should kick down that door like a SWAT team on a mission. You may suffer, but suffering is no gauge for whether or not you're on the right path. The path of the Christian is marked with suffering. Just look at Jesus, who was perfectly obedient to the Father's calling, and it led him to betrayal and death. But it also led him to resurrection. And the empty tomb was anything but a closed door. So heed the call. Don't waver. So those are the first two things. Listen for the call, heed the call, and finally, remember to recalibrate your compass. James K.A. Smith, who's actually going to be here next weekend, he's an author. I'm going to be out of town, it kills me. Come see it if you can. But James K.A. Smith, in his book, Desiring the Kingdom, he writes about how back in the old days, people used to think that like the fundamental thing about what it meant to be a human was that we were rational creatures. We were fundamentally thinking creatures. And then later people were like, actually, no, it's deeper than that. It's not just what you think that shapes your life. It's what you believe that shapes your life. And that's worldview, right? It's like what you believe is the thing that makes you human and shapes the direction of your life. And James K. Smith, in his book, Desiring the Kingdom, he says, no, actually, it's deeper than that. It's not just what that you think or the rational thing. It's not just what you believe. It's what you love. What you desire is what shapes your life. We were fundamentally made to be loving, desiring creatures. But sin and the fall have broken our ability to love and desire the right things in the right way. We're always looking for love in all the wrong places. We were made for communion and fellowship with God, but we're constantly forgetting that simple fact. G.K. Chesterton said that every man who ever walked into a brothel was looking for God. It's like there's this compass that points our hearts to Christ, the true object of our desire, but it gets knocked out of whack every day, and we need something to recalibrate it. I guarantee that someday soon you're going to doubt either God's existence or his goodness. There's a lot of talk these days about doubt, as if it's cool to be a doubting Christian somehow. And I hate this phrase, I'm an agnostic Christian. I don't know if you've heard that yet, but blah. Having doubts doesn't make you special. Everybody has doubts. Everybody has doubts. We do it all the time. Every time we sin, it could be argued that we've stopped believing in God. I doubt the existence or the goodness of God 50 times a day. It would be debilitating, not to mention foolish, to pay more attention to those 50 moments of doubt than to the faces of my children, or the affection of my wife, or the cool of the birdsong morning, or the wild and mysterious presence of music and art in the world, or the vast and compelling story of the Bible, a book unlike anything else in the world. Don't be surprised when your compass spins out of control. That's why we go to church. That's part of why we receive communion. That's why we read the Bible. That's why we pay attention to art and literature and film that's good and true and beautiful. That's why we don't forsake the fellowship of the saints, which is not just church on Sunday, but is also coffee with friends and conversations about the gospel and about feeding the poor. Every time we engage with those things, our compass is nudged back into place by the grace of God. We actually manage, for mere seconds sometimes, to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind. We're going to fall off the wagon again and again, of course, but his mercies are made new every single morning, world without end. So that's it. Listen for the call. Heed the call and don't waver. Finally, recalibrate your compass. I have wanted to quit more times than I care to admit. C'est la vie. The life that God has given me has been rich beyond measure, and yet it has also had its share of real gut-wrenching pain. My dad was a pastor. He just retired. He's here today. And he still actually, as soon as he retired, he started driving around doing fill-in preaching at churches around the state. When I was in high school, I remember seeing how stressed he was, how heavy was the burden he had to carry as the preacher in a small-town church with all its politics and frustrations. I asked him back then if he ever thought about hanging it all up. He said it was hard, sure, but that he wouldn't trade it for anything. The fulfillment and the gratification and the great honor of serving our good King far outweighed whatever trouble came with the territory. That is calling. And now that I'm 42, I feel the exact same way. Though it's been more difficult than I have time to tell you, I will go to my grave singing God's praises for calling me into his service. The enemy will try to recruit you, and he won't do it by trying to get you to join his team. He'll just try to get you to quit God's team. It amounts to the same thing. He's going to try to woo you away from God's kingdom. The culture will challenge you, make you feel like a fool, make you feel uncool. You'll be confronted with millions of reasons to hang it up. At the end of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, yes, I know I'm in a homeschool thing. At the end of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the corrupt Minister of Magic has been trying to recruit Harry to abandon Dumbledore's army. And Harry tells him, I'm Dumbledore's man through and through. So as you step out into the world, graduates, know that there is an enemy. Know that every day an epic battle is raging between light and darkness, truth and falsehood. Your own kingdom and the Lord's. So, have the courage, young ones, to look the enemy in the eye and say that you belong to the King. That you are his man, his woman through and through. His fight is your fight. His victory is your victory. That is your calling. You belong to him. That is your calling. So, sorry I'm a crybaby. I'm always a crybaby. So I'm going to close with this. King David, who is my favorite songwriter, wrote about calling that I ever could in Psalm 145. One generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. My dad is here, I'm here, my son is here. On the glorious splendor of your majesty, on your wondrous works I will meditate. They shall speak of the might of your awesome deeds, and I will declare your greatness. They shall pour forth fame, the fame of your abundant goodness, and shall sing aloud of your righteousness. My mouth will speak the praise of the Lord, and let all flesh bless his holy name forever and ever. That, my friends, is what we were made for. One generation commending God's works to the next, a world without end. This is our calling. Whatever you do with the rest of your lives, go in peace to love and serve the Lord.